Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and welcome to another episode of Haunted Gaming Creepypastas. You might not have heard that mentioning in a while. I feel kind of bad. I got rid of creepypastas, which is what made me here, and by all means I do intend to bring them back entirely. Don't get me wrong, creepypastas are going to be a big giant form of haunted gaming, but I want to do them a little bit more in a more interesting manner. I like this series right now where I can have sort of different styles for every different kind of thing that we cover, and the videos feel a little more unique. That being said, gripes on that aside, today we're going to take a look at Mario. Now, for those of you who might remember, I already had covered Mario. I actually read the Creepypasta, which was available on the Creepypasta Wiki at the time, and it was a good Creepypasta. It was actually one of the first few that I had entirely covered on the channel. Now, it went so far to the point that I actually ended up playing the ROM hack, which was created for this creepypasta as well. In fact, the creepypasta and the ROM hack were actually made in entire unison, and I had mentioned it at the time when I had made the initial Haunted Gaming video. But what I didn't do at the time was actually look at the entire forum thread I did, and I wanted to sort of look at it today, look at the game again, not play it so much as actually discuss what was really on it and the technicalities of it, and a little bit of a bonus aside from just that creepypasta as well. So, let's get started. And over here you actually have the initial forum post that you can actually Google up and look at entirely. If you go to Adam, for example, who is the actual writer of the creepypasta, Adam has actually been active for quite a long time. They started their account on this website, the SMW Central, which is one of the more popular sites for Super Mario World ROM hacking. In fact, it's not just Super Mario World. These guys are also behind Super Mario 64 and Yoshi's Island, which were other very popular games regarding Super Mario World and, the Mario franchise in of itself. Now, with a total of about 566 million hits for this website, 32,000 total users, it's not a small website by any mention of the imagination. Now, of course, compared to the rest of the internet, it might seem small, but back then, in 2009, this was a pretty big deal. Now, Adam, our person in question here, has actually been active since 2017. In fact, they actually have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to himself, Mr. APT1, for those who are wondering. Now, they were the ones behind the Mario Creepypasta. In fact, if you go back to the initial story, and we're going to look at it real quick, they had initially released a ROM called Mario.zip, alright? Ignore the %21, that's just part of the URL strats. Now, here, basically, all Adam had written was, "So it all happened, on tonight of all nights. I was bored, obviously contemplating what I thought I could do to waste time as I chatted with the people at SMWC. Obviously indicating to an IRC chat room at the time. We had good times and shared a few laughs together. Out of boredom, I decided to patrol the hacks waiting to be moderated section. Seems that we had quite a bit, 33 if I recall correctly. The first few hacks I saw when I sorted them by date were a couple really horrible ones with bad screenshots to boot. Naturally showed these hacks to be centralities currently on SMWC. We were laughing at how bad some of them were, but then I got to the hack called Mario. And just that, nothing more, nothing less. The description seemed quite odd, as if some Japanese hacker was trying to translate the original plot of Super Mario World into English, and failing horribly. I showed this to Kyron, and he started laughing at the description, and it read as follows. Now over here they were quoting the initial mentioning of the hack. This was actually part of an NFO file which was released alongside the IPS files. For those of you who don't know, IPS files were typically used for people who didn't want to really spread ROMs, which would actually be piracy. So basically they would give you an IPS file, you would overlay that into your ROM, and it would actually patch it so you could then put that ROM onto, say, an SNES emulator and play it without ever having to worry about piracy. The whole concept was that you would dump your own ROM, hence you were the one creating the backup on your own. Of course, in general practice, this wasn't really meant to be upheld. People just downloaded the ROM, patched it, boom, there you go. Now, I simply dismiss this as trying to act Japanese and release a crappy hack with some edits, or so that's what I thought this was at first. Now, of course, I could read through the rest of this, and this is just essentially the creepypasta. The hack, the NFO file mentions, as you play the role of Super Mario Plumber, verify that you are beautiful, Purin Setsutu Zatoru, again, kidnap Bowser the Evil King, it is your job to save her. The hack includes 6 levels of very long. Of course, you can see the English is quite broken. In fact, some would argue that it is the finest Pidgin English you might have ever heard. And as you scroll through, you'll notice that they actually have picture files of all the points where you find I hate you, point of advice, the little binary you see at Yoshi's Island house, things like that. Now, as we look through over here, this is the actual reactions of the people in progress. So, around the time when this was posted in 2010, which was not that old, in fact, when I covered the creepypasta, was probably at what point, 3 years old, I would believe. I think I covered this around 2013. 2014, I think I did other things, but this was a 2013 project for me. Now, as we were looking through, people at 2010, they started instantly saying, cool beans, I can't believe I have to read all this, but I have to say, cool story, bro. Now, as we look more and more into it, some people call this person out on hacking, some people call this person out on just being a troll, some people didn't actually believe it entirely, but as you go through and through and through, this was actually updated a little bit more. So this was released in multi-parts, and I had mentioned this initially when I covered this creepypasta. Adam made one post, and then people were wondering, and another post came by. So while people were already contemplating on the creepypasta hack and its origins, Adam was already drumming up a story alongside the game that he had obviously created. Now, part 2, somewhere not far off from Yoshi block, I found a message box. In the same place I remember that it always had been, though. If I'd learned anything at all from playing this, it's that whatever had to be in that message box message was not going to be even remotely normal in the slightest. This made me hesitant to hit it, but I ended up doing so anyways. I wanted to find out more. The message I was greeted with was as follows: "But is there anything I can do to change your mind?" And of course, Adam constantly thinking, what the fuck? We go furthermore into the story, and we find out that people at this point start believing that it's some form of a creepypasta, and it has some form of a believability to it. At some moments, people are actually impressed at how good the story is, or how good it comes across with, and actually start believing that it could have some form of reality behind it too. Going further into it, you can see that it actually has more pages, and around over here you can see that somebody actually had mentioned by the name of Kyron Menor, which is an administrator on the site, actually showcased the first glimpse of the picture file that was always associated with Mario the Creepypasta. Now, we had seen this as actually a thumbnail for the video, and we've seen it plenty of times. Basically, what would happen is, as you play through the game, you end up getting this JPEG file. The JPEG would not initially start off, but just changing the header around it, you can actually view that you would get this picture of this individual. Now, this isn't exactly something often scary. In fact, this could easily be done with any picture you can take. Say for example, take a selfie, hue the colors out to be red, and just go to your color correction curves and just level it out to the point where it's just your face and everything. Of course, pixelation and blockage can all be added in post-process, and this kind of a Photoshop job isn't really difficult to do. So to create something like this isn't exactly hard. You can make it any point. Seriously, take a selfie of yourself and mess around with the exact settings I told you. In fact, there are applications just on your cell phone that'll let you do it, and you can get the same kind of an effect. So this was bundled with the actual ROM file, and next thing you know, things started coming across, people couldn't sleep, and next thing you know, people compared this to like Yumi Nikki, Disturbing Games, or similar stuff like that. So, bottom line is, the game in of itself created quite some lulls, I guess you could say, that built out from this board, and the story could have been left at that. But at that point, for me personally, I went on the mission of finding out the ROM and playing it. Now, shortly after I'd made the initial creepypasta reading, I decided to play the game in of itself. The game's IPS file is still available to download just using the site as well. All you need is a legally acquired copy of Super Mario World for the SNES. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. There's a whole torrent of information available on the internet. By all means, go look for it yourself. Thank you very much. And you can play the game to your heart's content. Now, when I played the game, it was actually one of the more interesting ROM hacks that I ever touched to. At that point, my experience of ROM hacks weren't really that impressive. In fact, if you go back and look at the video, I'm kind of blown away by just how the smallest of details are sort of exaggerated in this game entirely. Now, the game wasn't anything special. You just go through. In fact, most of it just ended around Iggy's castle, things like that. You end up seeing the photo, and that's about it. The game wasn't really anything special, but what it was a game that was built entirely using ROM assets. When it was actually contained within the ROM. This was not an EXE game you were downloading. It wasn't something like, say, out of Acid Play, where they were using engines such as Game Maker or something like that, which is pre-made assets entirely. You've seen EXE games like Yoshi.exe, where that was an entire conundrum that they were tossing away, and Yoshi.exe was an interesting game, more of a walking simulator or hold the right key to progress. This one was built entirely using in-game assets, and it was entirely built away through a ROM, and it kind of goes to show you just how impressive the ROM hacking community can be when put to the right kind of stuff, and frankly, this stuff wasn't really easy to do. So, aside from that, the game was okay, the game was simple. I made a little funny bit, I guess, in the edit process, but hoo-ha, the whole world works, and that was essentially the Mario Creepypasta down to a nutshell. Now, that was just a cursory glance at something like, say, Mario the Creepypasta written by Adam, and the thing is, one could leave it at that, and essentially Adam's description of it wasn't much different than playing the game yourself, which you can already look at videos of the game being played and frankly see just what you wanted to see out of it anyways. The game is just a standard ROM hack. But I think what's interesting is reading into, say, pages 3 and 4 out of this thread, because while I said that there was part 1, part 2, like certain other mediums, this doesn't really have any finale to it as well. Adam never really bothered finishing this thread. In fact, what exists out of this is a closed thread, with just 4 pages remaining, and take a guess if Adam ever actually finished the entire creepypasta. No, he didn't. No, not at all. See, when you go to page 3, you got Wizard the Visential, who is typing about the actual image themselves. So let's go read through what the actual community thought of, and just where this whole situation ended up going to. Okay, I just spent an hour working on unscrambling that corrupted image. I took pieces of it, unscrambled it, and put it through some color filters, the highlighter feature in Paint. What I got will disturb me forever. I got this face, like a human's, except without a nose. It had 2 breathing holes. Its pupils were just vertical slits, like a snake. The eye, however, was morphed into a look of rage, the eyebrows slanting down. It had the most evil smile I've ever seen. It curved up its face almost up to the eyes. It had a mouth of very thin, razor-sharp teeth. It had no hair. I say had because as soon as it was completed, Paint had crashed. However, I got a screen cap beforehand, thank God for print screen. When I passed it on to another Paint session, I got a picture of the face itself, not my Windows bar, not Paint's shitty interface, but a cookie cut of the face itself. Apparently, Paint has an autosave function, though some of my previous projects saved to my pictures. However, the disturbing thing is that the file name was Please Help Me. I opened it up in Windows Photo Viewer and found that the image is 666 by 666 pixels. At this point, I just go, fuck this, and close the window. The image set itself as my background. I tried to upload it, and I got a screen that says, error, you are not allowed to do that, and get redirected to the main page. And I just noticed the whole time I've been chewing my fingernails. Furiously right now, my left hand is literally covered in blood. I'm kind of pale, but it's winter, so I think it's normal. Why won't the blood stop? It's getting all over my desk. I can't leave, though. I have to solve the mystery. I just wrap my hand in a piece of paper from the floor. It smells like cat piss, but I'll have to do. I'm getting pretty tired over here. I can't on. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe. Someone invert the colors of the image provided by Google Images from me. I'll just lay down right here. So, one thing to notice here, now I would say that this would just be your standard sock account, but it was an account created since 2009, so unless Adam actually planned on making this an entire year ahead of time, maybe, just maybe I could believe it. But I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say that this wasn't exactly planned ahead of time. Now the account was seen 1 year, 2 months, and 17 days ago, so it's pretty inactive as of this moment in time. Now, that being said, what's over here almost seems like another character Adam is involved in. This was not mentioned in the initial creepypasta that I had read. It only included part 1 of Adam's and part 2 of Adam's posting on this forum. Everything else was entirely omitted. So here you got another character who's actually almost adding to this creepypasta, detailing how they were looking at this photo, they found an image that is 666 by 666 pixels wide, and apparently it made itself its own, actually had made itself the wallpaper of their computer. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had this happen to me a couple times. If you ever looked at that video I made called A Weird Russian Game that I found where I played a serious Sam ROM hack, which was unnerving as hell, you found out that in the end it actually, after a screamer, turned my background into a specific wallpaper, and it got to the point where I actually had to delete the entire virtual machine that I was using because it was so corrupted with this virus that was injected through this game anyways. So you go through over here, you can see that everyone is actually kind of falling in for it, and of course this is all centered around being late at night. Obviously it's 5 in the morning for some of these people, and they're probably falling into some form of a creepypasta story, which, of course, some people can be gullible to believe it, some people can't, but as you can see, it's coming through and through and through pretty quick. You know, this thread is going out of control, and it's getting odd, as somebody has mentioned. Now, as we go through over here, you can find out that Adam is nowhere to be seen on the 3rd page. Going to the final page, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't see Adam, but you see Wizard the Visential once again. And he writes, what if all the message box texts are to be read in order of the level number? Just a thought. As the last message possibly says end of text. Also, it's kind of strange that every map not used is covered in stars. Now, at this point, I must say that it is very, very interesting to see that Wizard's the only one that's really posting about the about ways to figure it out, ways to figure out this ROM hack in a way. He's sort of keeping the thread in line, even though it's very derailed at this point. Now, Spud Alpha writes, man, Adam, I have to say you made a very nice creepypasta. A real hack. The way you wrote it was definitely creepy. At this point, people have caught on. Wizard the Essential responds with, wait, Mario is the antagonist? Mario is the original creator. Mario is the player. Mario is the hack name. It's like I'm really playing Super Mario Sunshine. Like, seriously, what if the bad Mario is actually Bowser in disguise? And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, you do not see Adam anymore. Golden Sonic writes, the only way we can get any more out of this is to somehow force the author to explain his reasons for creating this, which isn't really going to happen. So yeah, case it. And that's the end of that. A story that never really got any complete explanation out of. Now, when I first read this creepypasta, I thought maybe that was the end of the entire story, but it never got focused out of it. And as far as reading into the other parts of this forum page for anything detailing Mario, a SMWC creepypasta, now, what was a tiny little story, a 4-page thread on a forum, and a posting to an IRC message board about an interesting spooky game, ended up actually sparking other creepypastas and ROM hacks, simply deviating off of this entire situation as well. For those of you who've been around long enough, you might have heard of the creepypasta I Hate You, written by Slime Beast, a very talented individual who wrote stories such as Funny Mouth as well. Very, very talented creepypasta writer. The ROM hack that essentially spawned out of his story is also available on SMWC Central, and a game that I actually ended up playing too as well, which I actually have to say, compared to Mario, has a little bit more effort to it. Obviously, Slime Beast made a much more targeted story towards the ROM hack as well, using a style, and the ROM hacker essentially could cut and paste and basically make a story right out of it, and this actually implemented some really, really interesting things that I really think was possible in things such as a Super Mario World ROM hacking. But then I forget, with a game as popular as Super Mario World and the ROM hacking community behind it, even spawning so much as Nintendo making a game basically profiting off ROM hacking, I think it's safe to say I was really dumb thinking that they weren't really going to push the idea of having good old ROMs, using every little inch of that ROM space to create whatever kind of texture or spooky atmosphere they wanted to make. But moving on further than that, there's also more ROMs that we can entirely look at too. I don't want to just end this video off reading a cursory glance. I think if it's one way to leave this video off is sort of tie you guys into some more creepy parts of Super Mario World hacking. So let's actually take a look at some of the other Super Mario World ROM hacks that are available out in the wild that you can download and play for yourselves. So I don't think I have to tell anybody that JigsawSMC is obviously based off of the Saw movies. So it starts off. Now, the interesting thing about it is that with this kind of injection, some of it requires... Now, these ones come in BPS files. For those of you who don't know, BPS files are essentially files where, like IPS files are like the early version of it. BPS allows for ROM expansion, so it's a more advanced version of ROM hacking, and that's why you get sort of advanced techniques like this. So here it is, Mario, you may not know me, but I certainly know you. In fact, everyone across the globe knows your name. Time and time again, you have rescued the lives of others. But do you possess the ability to save your own? Of course, obviously signifying the Saw movies. Sorry, my Tobin Bell impression is not that amazing, but I try my best. Is it going to start? Now, this starts off the first level in the game called The Cellar. Now, first thing to say is this game has got some really, really loud audio effects. It's got entirely different music over here, but we've got to figure out how to escape, and essentially plays much more like a Saw movie. Some of these have, you have found a rusty hammer, so it's kind of like a Resident Evil survival horror in a way, I assume with a rusty hammer. What I'm going to do is break this, and yeah, you basically hit up on the D-pad, and you break the mirror with the hammer. That's bad luck, you know. So it's got this interesting survival horror type mechanic to it, and multi-layered everything. This is actually one of the more, already you can tell is more advanced than something like, say, out of, when you're surrounded by darkness, follow the light in your heart. This is already more advanced than, like, say, we see the I See You or things like that. This is already a much more interesting experiment, I gotta say. I'm surprised I didn't see this a little earlier, but then again, I wasn't really the one looking for ROM hacking, ROM hacks relegated to this kind of stuff. So follow the darkness if you can. One of the things that we can't really do is go through that, it seems. But it's telling us to follow the heart whenever we see darkness, so maybe we just have to go through all the way over here, something like that, or maybe there is some sort of an open area for us to explore. No, it does. Oh, ooh, what's that actually? You see that? We actually ended up coming across a really interesting nook and cranny, if you will. Let me just get back up over there. It's got a little bit of a weirdness with the graphics where it almost feels like I'm looking at something out of, say, Ghost House, but everything has been reworked entirely. It's actually really interesting on how the rework is. But one thing I'm going through over here, there's a little nook over here. Open that page up. Follow the blood. And over here we can look back and try to see where this blood really is. Oh, there it is. That's the blood right over. Obviously, it's a huge blood smear on the wall. Thank you very much. Let's go back in there and see just what we can find. I gotta say, the audio in this actually works wonders compared to just using the standard Mario soundtrack or, you know, standard Ghost House theme, which is what a lot of other Creepypasta games would do. Obviously, this one isn't really a Creepypasta game, so it can kind of get the liberties to go away with a lot of that kind of stuff. You have found a knife with a note. Alright, fair enough. Founding a knife. How much pain are you willing to suffer in order to save your own life? The clock is ticking. Live or die. So giving me only one choice, we can actually go and walk right into the knife. And you can choose to live or die entirely, which has got an interesting way of doing it. So you've got a little health bar on the top left of the actual game itself. And once you commit actual suicide, you, I think, maybe get kicked out of the game. I think maybe that's how it works. Or the game just continues to end itself. That could entirely be of its own thing. Let's go check out the next ROM. This one's known as The Haunt, which has a boo with hyper-realistic visions on it, I guess you could say. Now, of course, all these have their own simple login, start screens, whatnot. But Mario, you'll never underestimate our restlessness souls of determination and elegant violence. Rebel and you will die. Rebel. Anyways, let's hit A to it. So it's got that standard story start that you could see in Mario. Now, Mario's never really known for its story, I guess you could say. So just giving you a standard premise of you're being spooked, go for it. Now, of course, the map goes changed. You can see 666s everywhere. Mario's a little bit discolored on the top left. What if we go into the if we go into this segment of the game, we can see that the boos look slightly more spookier than I would ever have to even vision seeing. And already the game kind of looks better than what Nintendo had tossed it off as. It's got a little more interesting effects going around with it. Now, one thing I can't seem to do is pass the ever lovely tree before me. I don't know what the heck's going on over there, but I seem to die often quickly to this boo. Let me actually figure out how that works, but already off the bat I can kind of see a definite improvement over other games like the ICU or Mario, which you also have to mind in the fact that because of how they were made, they had to also work within that realm of believability. You know, you couldn't just have those games looking the way they did. Now, for some reason, I can't seem to cross that area entirely, which is a little off-putting, I must say. A little off-putting. So it seems one of the many locales that we had to essentially go to was all the way down over here trying to escape from these spooky ghouls. Now, some of the actual stuff is hidden through the forefront over here, some of the stuff that we really can't seem to avoid. But going through over here, it seems the trees are supposed to be left untouched, if anything, and there's only graves that we can really escape down under. And here we go, we're right back under. So basically what we got over here is a bunch of puzzles, stuff that we're trying to escape from. Of course, the enemies begin to change dramatically to the point where we don't even have boosts to worry about anymore. Going down over here, you can sort of exit up back into these segments, go across as much as you can, and frankly should be out of here in some basic regard. Now, it seems over here that we've actually failed the puzzle and we're back entirely where we shouldn't have been, so unfortunately for that, not much we can do. You can actually see that from the the fact that we're here again. So puzzles to solve, puzzles to really dictate around, and nothing much more beyond that. Let's go try up another one. MD ends up being the last one to really look through, and this one is by Souls to Limbo, which is the Exodus to Death, quite possibly the more ambitious version of a Super Mario World ROM hack. As you can see already, text has been changed. Shall Mario's soul escape from hell in order to avoid oblivion? Ladies and gentlemen, we have went straight from just a cutesy jigsaw, you know, ghoul hunting you down, Mario creepypasta, all the way to this. So it's impressive to see what the Mario creepypasta really spawned, a game like this, where I guess it's not really so much as horror, but rather impressive if we consider what we're looking at here, ladies and gentlemen. This is an entirely, totally worked, different, you know, Armageddon-themed version of Super Mario World. So I guess if you really wanted to say, man, wow, that is certainly the more exciting of things that I've ever seen in this ROM hack. Let me tell you right now. I don't think I've ever seen stuff like this in a Super Mario World ROM hack, and wow, this has full-on cutscenes going with death standing over there. Jesus. Peach is right over here. Look at this poor soul I found. I mean, there are obviously joke ROM hacks like Mario vs. Sonic 2.exe. I'm not even joking you, that exists. But for the fact that we have this to the extent where we're at, Peach being thrown into a pit of lava, my god. This is stuff that you wouldn't even see in like Game Maker stuff where they have more liberties to get away with it. Jesus. My god, there's Yoshi. It seems like Yoshi is completely dead over there. My lord. This is actually kind of depressing to look around with. I feel like some of the actual sprites have actually been changed around entirely. Now with this, it seems like Mario has somewhat of a health counter as well. Ooh, there's Chrono Sprite basically laying there completely dead. Seems like they put that in there. There's a lot of assets taken around from numerous SNES games. But this is quite possibly one of the more interesting releases of an SNES ROM entirely. This is actually ambitious and amazing, I gotta say. So passing through the levels, you got Underground Forest, you have a whole story around over here, and you can keep on going through as more you want. So delving out of the realm of Creepypasta, but obviously looking at, wow, even the enemies are entirely reworked. Jesus. This is very impressive stuff, I gotta tell you. But, wow, that last game, my god. That was amazing. So you can see the Mario Creepypasta essentially started off with something that we had read in just a two-part explanation, but it was something that the community around it invested themselves into, and it's a game that ended up being a really interesting Creepypasta game, and it spawned another amazing, talented Creepypasta writer to actually create their own Creepypasta, and then somebody to make a game out of that. And last but not least, you had games centered around Saw, you had games centered around ghost hunting and puzzles related to it, somewhat like a 2D PT, if you will, crying out loud, with some of the asinine puzzles involved in that. And finally, a game that pushes, I would argue, the SNES to its limits and takes Mario to the most hellish, ambitious journey I've ever seen. Ladies and gentlemen, I think today's Haunted Gaming episode turned out, in my opinion, to be pretty damn good. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I found that looking into the Mario Creepypasta, looking actually deep into it, I learned some new things about the story myself, and frankly, going beyond just the story, I think the surrounding context with it is rather amazing. So we got to look at some spooky games around it, and we got to look at the context around the Mario Creepypasta. Unfortunately, it never ended, but maybe that's a good thing, because it did spawn out a lot of things that, frankly, led to bigger and better, more ambitious projects out of it. That being said, if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Just like if you dislike it. This has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, part of Creepypastas and the new reworked Haunted Gaming. Don't worry, Creepypastas will also be coming soon. I'm in the mood for some narrative stuff. I think having a break like I have, nearly a month involved, is actually pretty important, so maybe you might get some new stories read out. Let me know what you want read out. Let me know what you think. But don't forget, I will also be doing this format as well, so keep everything as energetic and new as I wanted to. Let me know what you think about it. This is me, Mudahar, and I am out.